I started off doing ketubot, and I've done about 600 original ketubot, the lettering and the painting. And I love doing them because each one reflects the interests and the personalities of the people that I'm designing them for. I designed and learned Sofer Stam, learned Sofrut, the art of Torah lettering, for a Megillah that is actually on display in the foyer here. It was commissioned by Marcy Gilbert and Rabbi Shalom Schachter, and it has 32 images relating to the Megillah. And then, as Dorian mentioned, I work in many different media, and every medium has its own challenges and excitement. It's wonderful to learn how to use with different materials and express using those materials. So this is a mosaic that I made. I designed and created it. It's about 5 feet high, 2.5 feet wide, and it has about 20,000 glass tiles that I cut and put together. Then I cut the entire mosaic up into sections so it could be transported to Jerusalem, where it's in a home there. So this exhibit is called Illuminations, the Art of Haftorah. I was commissioned by Beth Tzedec Synagogue to do an illustration for each Haftorah of the year. There are 82 Haftarot, 54 weekly Haftarot, and the others are for the different holidays throughout the year. Many of us equate the Haftorah with bar and bat mitzvah. It's become sort of a given that a bar or bat mitzvah girl will read a Haftorah or part of it. And the Haftorah is much more than that. The Haftorah, which is read after the regular Torah reading, is, as I said, read every Shabbat morning and on every holiday. Now, the stories in the Bible, I've always loved the stories in the Bible. And I used to actually have them, read them as bedtime stories for my kids. They are full of passion and excitement and family dynamics and petty arguments, dynasties, adventure. And those stories are universal. Even though they were written thousands of years ago, they are the same stories that we see on television, in movies, in our own lives, in the lives of our friends. So those, like I said, the passions and the love and the arguments and the family infighting and the political workings, it's all part of our lives today. And the themes and lessons apply to us as much as the characters from 2,000 to 5,000 years ago. So I wanted to bring that realization through the art. And the other thing I wanted to do was to unite our generation with all the generations of Jews before us. So when I looked at the different Haftarot, I thought of the art that we have in our history. And I'm familiar with a lot of history books. So this is a Haggadah. How many of you are familiar with this Haggadah? Can I see? Okay, a good number of people are familiar with this Haggadah. It was done by a man named Arthur Szyk. And his illuminations are incredible. And I thought, you know what? Arthur Szyk should be part of this collection. Different Haftorahs reminded me of things that are in Illuminations from medieval times. So we've got these gorgeous pictures from 14th century France. And this picture from Germany. So I wanted to bring those things into the artwork. So now I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour of some of the pieces that I created and how I got to them. So there are a couple of readings that describe the menorah that was in the temple. And this particular illumination is from Cervera, Spain, 1300. And I used it for the picture for Beha'alotcha. Beha'alotcha is from the book of Zechariah. And Zechariah had a vision of this menorah with the menorah in the middle, 2 olive trees growing beside the menorah, the olives going into bowls, golden bowls, and then the oil going into the tops of the menorahs. So this reading is done twice in the year. It's done during Hanukkah and during this particular parsha, which also discusses lighting the menorah. So when I had seen this and remembered this, I thought, wow, that medieval artist from 1300, look at the way he took the trees and expanded them beyond the borders. Isn't that amazing? This has to be part of the collection. So it is. In the Parsha Lech Lecha, Abraham is told to go to a new land. The Haftorah is from the book of Isaiah, and it talks about the coastlands and the islands. And I thought we should have a map for this Haftorah. This map is called the Cloverleaf Map of the World, or the Tri-Leaf Map of the World. And I've seen it in many Jewish books of Jewish art and Jewish history. And in the center of the tri-leaf that shows 3 continents, there's Jerusalem. Perfect imagery for this Haftorah. So then I looked to see who did it. Well, it's a woodcut from 1581 by a German pastor. And the reason it's got 3 continents is that represents the Trinity. So that's why it's 3, not 4. And I had made a promise to myself that I would only use Jewish sources. So here I had found the perfect map that I'd seen in lots of Jewish books and lots of books about Jerusalem, but it was done by a pastor, so I had to find another thing to do. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I looked at coastlands. I may as well Google Jewish maps, knowing that I'm not going to find anything, but what the heck. And to my surprise, I found out that the Catalan Atlas, which was created in 1375 in Spain, was created by Abraham Cresques and his son Yehuda. They were the best map makers in the world. Not only were they the best map makers in the world, they created a new navigational map with sight lines that came from a compass rose. The compass rose, which we see on maps over there, has sight lines that go to different major cities. By using those sight lines, sailors could navigate more accurately, and they changed map making and map reading for all of history. So that's what I used as my drawing for Lech Lecha. The Yedaber. This is the Duke of Sussex Pentateuch. And I used this as a drawing for the Haftorah for Chukat, which is about a man named Yiftach, or Jephthah in English, who was the half-brother hated by his brothers. He was thrown out of his home and told, don't come back. We don't want to share the inheritance with you. So he left. Well, lo and behold, the brothers were under attack. Yiftach had turned out to be a great warrior. They went back to Yiftach and said, will you come and lead us in war? Because with your acumen, your strategies, we'll be able to conquer our enemies. And he said, yes, I'll come back, only if you let me have my part of the inheritance. So the story is about soldiers. The story is about war. And I thought, okay, what kind of manuscript can I find that has soldiers in it? And I came across this particular manuscript. So you can see that there are 4 soldiers in the corner, in the sides, and there are these griffin beasts around them. The soldiers are drawn in great, beautiful detail, but they're crusaders. And why are they crusaders? Because Jews weren't soldiers. They weren't allowed to hold arms, but the crusaders were. So when this artist was drawing the tribes and drawing them as being armed tribal members, they chose the crusaders as their model. And this is the drawing for Chukat, where Yiftach is leading the tribe of Manasseh against the Ammonites. Another place where we have soldiers is in the story of Joshua and the Israelites going into Canaan. They had to go into Canaan and fight to take their land. And they had to be ready for war. So we know about Joshua going into Jericho. Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho. When Joshua was going into Jericho, he was in the woods, and he saw a man coming towards him. And the man had a sword. He didn't know if this was an enemy or not. And Joshua said to him, "Are you for me or against me?" And the person answered, "I am from the legion of the Lord." He was an angel, and he was there to help Joshua. And I thought about it, and I thought, okay, what other situation is there that Jews have faced where they were fighting and they didn't know who they were fighting against? What kind of soldiers were in that situation? And I thought it was the partisans, because they would be fighting the war in the forests, fighting the Germans, fighting the Russians, fighting and being with other partisans who might have been anti-Semitic. So they might have been fighting for the same goals, but they weren't necessarily friends. So they had to find out if the person they were meeting was for them or against them. And I modeled these 2 soldiers on pictures of Polish partisans from Vilna. So these are some of the photographs that I looked at before I decided what I was going to draw. Slavery is a big thing in Judaism. We have to remember that we were slaves and not enslave others. In Mishpatim, there are a lot of laws about slavery that are discussed. And I thought, again, okay, I want to do something about slavery, but I want it to be Jewish. How do I make it Jewish? So it's more typical to think about the enslaved children in third world countries who, and we've read stories, probably all of us, where children are chained to the loom and they aren't allowed to leave. They have to keep on doing their weaving. And this is a photograph down there of African slaves. But then I remembered the women who were working in the shmata business in New York. I came across this photograph of young people and older people in the 1909 May Day labor parade in New York City. And you can see that one of the young women, one of the girls, is wearing a sign that says, "Abolish slavery." The girl beside her has the same message, but it's in Yiddish. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company advertised itself as being one of the most progressive factories in New York. They had fire escapes. They had water so that if there was a fire, they could put it out. But the water was in a different part of the building, and the pitchers, they didn't have hoses, the pitchers were on hooks on the wall. So even though they advertised themselves as being very progressive, they really weren't very progressive. Not only that, they were worried about union organization. So they would lock the doors and windows so people couldn't leave or come in to talk about forming unions. So when a fire broke out in the shirtwaist factory in 1911, I think it was 124 young women died, or 146 young women were died, Italian and Jewish women. And these are the fire escapes that melted by the heat of the fire. So this is what I did for Mishpatim. I have those people from the march, the burning building in the background, and the smoke behind them. On Sukkot, we read about the war of Gog and Magog. And Isaiah said that the troops would be coming, that there were Gog and Magog would come from the north and come down, but God would help the Israelites to fight against Gog and Magog. So I thought about, again, how am I going to discuss this? How am I going to paint it? I wanted every single Haftorah picture to be part of our history, something we could relate to, something that would relate our lives today to the same things that were happening thousands of years ago. I spoke to my sons in Israel, who both served in the army, and one of them said, "You know what, Ima? There was a fight called Emek HaBacha, the Valley of Tears, that took place in the north. What happened was troops came from Syria. They had 500 tanks. The Jews, the Israelis, had 40 tanks. For some reason, the Syrians abandoned the fight and left, and the Jews won. So this is what I drew to represent the fight of Gog and Magog and Emek HaBacha. The coincidence is, and I didn't realize it when I did the painting, but that fight was part of the Yom Kippur War, and it took place one day before Sukkot. And this is the reading for the Shabbat of Sukkot. One of the things that I wanted to do, as well as bring in those types of history, I wanted to feature, to make sure that I could feature different artists who are wonderful artists. And one of those people was Art Spiegelman, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his book, Mouse. He is an amazing, amazing graphic artist. He did many covers for The New Yorker, many covers for The New Yorker. And his book, Mouse, introduced the Holocaust to a completely new generation. And it brought the graphic novel into the mainstream. So I thought, Art Spiegelman deserves to be part of this collection. So I brought him in as the figure of Jeremiah in the Haftorah for Matot. And in that Haftorah, Jeremiah is saying that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And God says, well, you have to do something about it. You have to make an announcement. And Jeremiah said, give me a sign, God, to show that I am the one that you have chosen. So God gave him a sign of an almond branch and a burning cauldron. So that's what I have in this illustration. So the stick and the burning cauldron are near the window, and we see, maybe it's New York City falling apart with Mouse watching on. I've always had an interest in medieval manuscripts and Renaissance manuscripts. And interestingly enough, that is my wedding invitation on the left. And on the right is an illumination from a Rothschild manuscript. And the Rothschild manuscript takes its place for the Parsha Vayetze. So I have Hosea the prophet at a stender, at a prayer stand. And those are the animals and flowers that are mentioned in the Haftorah itself. So as you look at these pieces, at the top is something based on my friend Arthur Schick. So that is King Solomon at the top. The next painting is based on a painting from 1280 France, Eastern France, an illumination from a book. And then the next picture is the vision that Isaiah had in Parshat Bo, where he's talking about how Egypt and the Pharaoh is going to have problems. And the images that he mentions are actually images that parallel images from the Parsha itself. As I said, this collection was initiated by Beth David Synagogue. And the images have been painted into a Haftorah scroll that they use on Shabbat. And I hope that you will look at the pictures and enjoy the pictures. And does anybody have any questions?
How did you combine your love of art, and how did it happen, that inspiration to put it into the Jewish themes and into these beautiful paintings?
I think that's just the way that I look at the world. I look at all different, when I look at art, I see it as the expression of a person. When I look at text, I see it also as expression of a person, expression of a soul. So to me, there's no division. It always comes together. I look at Jewish text as being a map or a guideline for morality, ethics, and respect, which is something that if everybody carried that with them every day, the world would be a much better place and a much more peaceful place. And so, as I said, as I see nature, as I see art, I see that soul coming out of it, and I just apply it to the text that I'm working with. Okay, is there, yes?
Out of all of these wonderful Haftorah pieces, what for you was the story that really moved you emotionally the most as an artist?
There are a few. That piece of the two men, the partisans, that really hits me. I love that piece. I love a lot of the work. I've got to say, I love a lot of the work. The Mishpatim, the slavery, that one also hit a very strong nerve. And the pieces that I did for Tisha B'Av, of course, is the day of deepest mourning in the Jewish year. Those pieces were very, very important and very, very evocative to me. Okay.
I can't help but wonder how long this project took you.
It took me 10 months. And after I finished it, I actually continued working on it a little bit longer. Over the last couple of years, I've added more imagery to it. Yes?
In the hallway, I noticed that there were two separate illustrations for the same portion. So is it because you saw other stories within that you wanted to illustrate? Because some of them just have one?
Yes, well, with some of them, for instance, the Art Spiegelman piece, I had done a different image for Matot, but I thought Art Spiegelman's got to be in this collection. Where can I fit him in? So it was really important for me to find a place, and when I finally found a place, that became a double. For Lech Lecha, I first focused on a landscape where God had promised Abraham that his offspring would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the dust on the earth. And there was an allusion to that in the Haftorah. When I finished it, I thought, no, this has more to do with the Torah than with the Haftorah. So I have to go back and find something that is more related to the Haftorah. So I did another piece for that. So there were different reasons for doing two different pictures for the same Haftorah.
Another question. So do you paint right on the Haftorah, right onto the parchment?
Yes, I do. So each of the pictures was actually done twice. They were done on paper first. Then I repainted them by hand into the Haftorah scroll. So it's completely new painting. There's no reproduction elements in it. It's all hand painted into the Haftorah scroll. The pieces that are in the hallway, in the exhibit here, are actually limited edition prints. So I had the original pieces scanned and made into limited edition prints. Yes?
Sorry. I have to say, it's just beautiful because I'm from Beth David and we commissioned this Haftorah scroll, and I do a lot of Haftorah reading, so when I see your illustrations as I'm starting to read the Haftorah, it's just beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. So Rosalie was saying that she reads the Haftorah at Beth David and enjoys seeing that picture as she begins to read Haftorah. Yes?
Could you please explain where did the space come from? That image.
Why is there a space there?
Well,
Beth David commissioned a sofer, a conservative sofer from North America who lives in Jerusalem, to write out the Haftarot. And they said to him, between each Haftorah, leave X amount of space because we're going to have a picture there. Yes.
How common is illuminating text? Like most of the Megillas that we see don't have illuminations added to them. So how common is it?
Okay, it's not uncommon, but it's not common. So when you have a Megillat Esther, generally it's only lettering. There isn't illumination, but there are illuminated Megillat Esther, and there have been from throughout history. And there are a number of them in the collection in the museum here. In terms of a Sefer Haftarot, the illuminated Haftorah series, the way I've done it, I've been told by an expert who lives in Israel that he has never seen a collection of Haftorah images ever in history, and he's done a lot of research on that. There are a couple of Mordechai Rosenstein does something with the Haftorah, but he's actually illuminating a letter as opposed to, or a word, as opposed to doing an actual picture. But Sefer HaHaftarot, there aren't a lot of them in the world, and they're generally just the Haftorah itself without any kind of illustration or painting. Yes?
Is the size of the painting in the scroll the same as the one size that you originally created?
The original is much smaller. The original, it would be called a miniature. It's about 1 inch high and 4.5 inches across. So it is about half this, like a quarter the size of what you see in the hallway. They're very, very tiny. Yes?
Yes, just about the size. I was wondering, do you work with large magnifying glasses or do you work actually with the small space?
I have stronger eyeglasses that I use, but I don't use a huge magnifying glass. I just use slightly stronger glasses when I'm painting. Yes?
Do you have any plans to take this Haftorah scroll and put it into a book?
I'm actually working on a book, on a Haftorah book right now. So what I envision is that the book will have the Haftorah image at the top and an explanation of the quotation that I've used, plus an explanation of the artwork itself. So I'm working on that. Thank you. Yes?
So if you're working on a book version of that they've commissioned, do they have copyright? Or do
No. I own the copyright to the images, and so I can use it to put on an exhibit like this.
We could one day buy a Haftorah book with their images like that?
No. The Haftorah book that I'm personally working on, if you want to commission me to do an entire Haftorah book, that'd be great. I'll do it. But what I'm working on won't have the Haftorahs itself in the book. It will be the imagery plus the explanation. So the story behind the picture and the reason that Haftorah is combined, was chosen for that particular Parsha reading. So why was King David on his deathbed? That's the picture that we see in that scroll right now. Why was it chosen for Parshat Vayechi? So it's going to be English text. It's not going to be the Haftorah itself. Yes?
Speaking of commissions, there are some absolutely amazing pieces all throughout the gallery. If one wanted to get one of them, how would they go about it?
Okay. I don't know who that young man is, but Dorian will mention it.
Okay, I'll talk about Jonathan.
Thank you.